I'm Dan Smolen. I built a successful executive career in marketing and communications before becoming a top headhunter and founding my own executive search firm. Now get this, every day, mainstream media runs stories in which old school bosses and thought leaders frame your work and workplace issues in ways that are often divisive and unmeaningful. And that's just crazy. The time has come for you to answer the question, what's your work fit, so that your work and career fit who you are, how you want to live, and what you want your lasting contributions to be. What's your work fit? It answers your questions and tackles the issues that keep you up at night about advancing your career in this time of workplace revolution. So let's get started. Hey, good day, everyone. Dan Smolen from What's Your Work Fit. I hope you're having a good and successful week. Got a great show today. We'll get started just momentarily, but before we do, a couple of asks. First of all, if you haven't done so already, please engage with What's Your Work Fit on the platform or platforms of your choice. We're on LinkedIn Live. You can hit that follow button, and we're on the What's Your Work Fit YouTube channel. Go on our page there, hit subscribe. You'll never miss future live shows, full shows, clips, and other information. Next up, we have a Substack. What's Your Work Fit has a Substack. You can find us at dansmolen.substack.com. This venue is terrific. It's like a digital newspaper. And along those cross tabs along the top, you can see you can migrate to live and recorded shows that we've done, video clips, our audio podcasts, and also an archive of all the stories that we've done. So join us there, please. There's no charge for it. I want to encourage as many people as possible to sign up. And last but not least, if you are a longtime member of this show, you know my ask. If you like what you see and hear, do tell 5 friends to subscribe to What's Your Work Fit on our platforms. Well, very good. It is my great pleasure to welcome back our returning guest, Professor Nick Bloom. How are you, Nick?
Very good, thank you. Nice to be back.
Nice to have you back. It's been 2 years, way too long. For those of you who don't know Professor Nick Bloom, a little about him. He is a Stanford University professor of economics. He is also the co-founder of WFH Research, which is a highly respected resource that studies the economic and societal impacts of work-from-home arrangements, particularly in the wake of the global COVID pandemic. You are our go-to resource, Nick. And again, thank you for joining us today. Let's bring on our co-hosts. Coming from LiquidSpace, Mark Gilbreath. How you doing, Mark?
Hi, guys. Great to be here.
And of course, last but not least, from Morta Vita, Fran Saele. How you doing, Fran?
Great, Dan. Thank you. Good to be with everybody here. They all look great today.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's chaste living for me. So let's get to it, Nick. The question we want to ask you is, why are we still talking about RTO mandates? Correct that whip.
Well, you know, the thing is, we're in this new steady state. In fact, we've been in it since I was last on the show in 2023, where something like, look, half of Americans go into work, not the office, actually go into work every day, like right. Food service, front office, security, you know, a lot of transport, retail, hospitals, etc. The other half of us are mostly on a hybrid. There's about 40% of Americans on a hybrid, roughly 10% fully remote. And that 40% is just endlessly arguing about how many days, which days. But what you hear when you read RTO in the newspaper, you should be very careful. It typically does not mean 5 days into the office. And that's, I think, is the enormous confusion. There are a few outliers like Amazon, sure, that are trying to hold people back for 5 days. But mostly it's kind of, I would say, mediaized headlines. You know, someone's going to read that article of you write it, everyone's been called back to the office, whereas in fact it's, Goliath National Bank calling you in for 3 days a week. So I don't so much blame the media, and I love the media a lot, but I think that's partly where the frenzy's getting whipped up from.
Fran, get us started.
Well, Nick, I think we could surely call RTO the big lie, right? Everybody agree with that? I think no question about that. And since there's so much we could talk about that's been talked about ad nauseum about RTO and the levels, the steady state that we've been in, maybe we should turn ourselves quickly to something that perhaps is more timely and more relevant, I think, to people in the way they work and where they work. And that's the AI situation, the agentic AI and other forms of AI that are cropping up everywhere. The sense that we have, and is it a big bubble, or is it a small piece of gas? We don't know, at this point yet. Certainly the money's flowing, and there are huge investments going on, and there are expectations. The people involved there talk about the things that are going to happen as soon as next year. There's experiments underway. We're going to get there's going to be rollouts over the next year or two. But yet there was an MIT survey that came out a month or two ago that said that there's only 5% of it that seems to be working right now. So with all of that as a background, assuming we do roll out AI at the levels that everybody expects them to be at, what's your take on how that's going to impact the hybrid balance that's been in place for 3 years? Which part of this is going to go up? Which part of it is going to go down? The people who seem to know how to do this for larger organizations like Accenture and Jamie Dimon even is doing this, where basically they're abandoning the processes they have in place. They're going to go start from scratch and rebuild around AI and leverage it to the maximum extent possible. Where is that going to impact people?
So the first thing is, I think, is a valuable lesson. I mean, I hear this all the time out in Silicon Valley, is a valuable lesson from economic history, which is what's called the J curve. So if you look at previous pieces of technology like the internet, the personal computer, we can go back in time, the steam engine, the electric motor, air conditioner, there's a ton of them. What you see is these things have huge impact in the long run, but it typically takes many years. And why is that? Because you have to change organizations, you have to change infrastructures. And, it's one thing Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan with elite programmers, but the typical average American business is, not at the frontier. So AI, I think, is going to be enormously important. But, the MIT study highlights what I keep hearing, which is as of today, late 2025, probably into 26, maybe 27, we're just not seeing a huge impact. So, yes, 2030, 2035, sure. But, nobody's jobs are disappearing today. I think on your second point, there's two different views I've heard. So one view is, look, AI is the big friend of being in person. So AI can do the types of things that you can do fully remote. Think of some kind of repetitive, like proofreading or basic payroll, this kind of stuff. In fact, a lot of it's been offshored. So I think, it's the bigger enemy of offshoring, actually. So a lot of the stuff that, humans abroad can do cheaply, AI can do even cheaper. So under that view, the thing that AI can't do is be a physical person and have empathy and deal with managerial issues and fire underperformers and promote, et cetera, et cetera. So that suggests we're all coming back into the office. We don't need to be in every day, to be clear. So hybrid is totally fine. If you have to be in 2-3 days a week, that's enough. The alternative view, I spoke to Rich Barton for a while. He was a very thoughtful person. He was the founder of Zillow. He was actually one of the co-founders of Expedia and Glassdoor, so a very successful business person. And he said, look, for Zillow, which is mostly remote, they're remote first, it has been amazing because it's made them much more flexible. So he said, look, if AI comes in, they've been restructuring teams. And imagine, there's the four of us. Dan is in, Chicago. Francis, you're in, Atlanta. Mark is in Seattle and I'm in Boston. It's very hard to say, you four, you need to get together to create this new AI team. He said, look, but if you're more remote, you can rapidly reshape stuff. He said it's easier to hire and fire. So in some senses, it makes you more adaptable. So I think it's going to be the enemy of repetitive remote. Otherwise, I don't think it's going to have a huge impact. And I think that impact, when we see it, it's going to be 3 to 5 years from now.
So when you say repetitive remote, how different from remote first is that, and maybe I'm just not understanding the differences there.
Okay, I'll give you two examples. One is like call centers, data entry. When I went into my, recently I went to a drive-through burger restaurant. I shouted my order into this code, and it turned out when I asked them, the person taking the order was in Tennessee. So that kind of thing is relatively low wage, not much innovation, not much mentoring, not much creation. That kind of thing I think AI is going to do in kind of 3-4 years. There's another version, which is high-end coders, people writing books, journalists, maybe academics. I mean, we have to go into teach the kind of people that are creatives that are remote. That kind of thing I think is safe because, I mean, AI is nowhere near. I mean, maybe 10 years from now, but right now it's nowhere near encroaching on that kind of activity.
Okay. And the fact that they're remote anyway, it just facilitates the process.
Yeah, the other thing that I've noticed, I go to, you, Mark and Dan on this, is there's no one that seems to be truly remote. So again, I'll just give you some anecdotes. I'm writing a book, and so I've been interviewing a lot of CHROs, CEOs. So from companies like, Zillow, Instacart, Dropbox, Upwork, Airbnb, etc. A ton of these firms that are kind of remote first. And when you talk to them, they always say, look, our employees still typically meet up once a month. So you may live out in Hawaii or Maine or somewhere, but you're still typically meeting once a month. And to take Zillow as an example, because I know them well, every quarter they have a Z retreat. So the Z retreats, the whole firm gets together. And then a higher frequency teams may meet, the Atlanta team or the service team may meet in some place. And so, I think remote, everything is kind of shades of hybrid, put it this way. There's no truly in person. I actually interviewed David Solomon at Goldman's, and he even said, look, we're more remote than we were pre-pandemic. And on the other hand, firms that are claimed to be truly remote are still meeting up at least once a month.
Right. And plus David's a disc jockey at heart anyway, so he doesn't really care.
That was the amazing thing. I talked to him for 45 minutes. The first 15 minutes was on, trance music and disc jockey. I weirdly, embarrassingly, I thought I'd never confess this, quite like that music, but my kids tell me it ages me. So, I should probably keep quiet about it.
That's great. Thank you, Nick.
Mark?
Nick, a lot of RTO policy still feels like it's performance art. You've said the debate's over. So who's still pretending it's not? And what's this really about? I mean, is the pretending about productivity or control or something else altogether?
So two thoughts. I mean, I for this book, the number one piece of advice I give companies about making hybrid or remote work is good performance evaluation. So, Mark, if you're managing me, if I'm in the office, you can see what I'm doing, typing away. When you walk by, you can see what's on my screen. Is it Python or I'm watching Netflix, whatever. So if I'm working at home, you can't evaluate my inputs. You have to evaluate what I perform, my output. So over and over again, I'll talk to organizations and say, look, if you want hybrid, to be honest, just any good management, forget even, wherever you are, you should be evaluating what people do. The issue that comes up is even very thoughtful firms will say that is the right measure. But for jobs, say a software coder or a banker or, me as an academic, we don't get to see how good your performance is for maybe 6 months to a year. It's quite hard to measure it in real time. So that's the right measure, but it's not perfectly measured. And I say there's another thing, I'm going to call it the wrong measure, which is your bum in that seat, but it's very well measured. So you've got a weird trade-off between measuring the right thing badly or measuring the wrong thing well. And a lot of managers will say, look, I get some comfort from seeing you, Mark, in that seat 2 days a week. I know it's not a good measure of performance. It's honestly a 4 out of 10, but at least I know week by week whether you're in your seat. So generally what I hear over and over again is the more you have good output performance evaluation, the more you are relaxed about having people come in less days, because the more that's kind of a crutch. Like for me, I do teaching and research, and if Stanford perfectly knew how good my teaching and research is, they wouldn't care where I was. As it happens, teaching has to be in person, so I have to go in anyway for that. But, they generally don't manage my time. But if they had no way to evaluate that, they'd be telling me instead, Nick, you got to come in 4 days a week because it's all we can do. So frankly, my take on this is badly managed organizations tend to fall back on, bums and seats watching, and well-managed organizations tend to be moving towards often hybrid, whereby they say, look, we can manage performance well, but we maybe want you in 2, 3, 1 day a week.
Nick, I've heard, it resonates with a lot of the indictments I've heard of sort of the weakness in managerial skill, frontline teams, mid-level teams, senior management, in particular, since the pandemic. It seems like the stresses of managing distributed teams or partly hybrid teams and so forth is just an exacerbation of a weakness that was already there. If the invisible hand's going to come in and fix that for us, who's going to deliver? How do you envision that needed managerial skill set emerging? Where's it going to come from? Is HR going to bring that in? Is it going to be the next generation of leaders that just grow organically? What's the fix for that? If that's one of the biggest issues that's handicapping effectiveness right now.
So I love you asked about the invisible hand. So as an economist, I think we're roughly in, post-pandemic free market equilibrium. So one way to think about that is when we survey people, we've surveyed by now probably 500,000 people.
Yes.
35% of people want to work from home all the time. 20% want the exact reverse. They want to come in every day, and 50% roughly the other half want a hybrid. So the best outcome is an economy where there are some firms like JP Morgan that drags you in every day. Because if you want to come in every day, that's great. So you'll go work for JP Morgan. As long as JP Morgan stays in its lane and has you come in every day and is consistent and says that and does it year by year, they're good. And on the other hand, as long as Zillow has folks work from home, 25 days out of a month or whatever, allowing for 1 or 2 in, that's good. The problem happens when firms change, like when Amazon suddenly took a hybrid policy and moved it to fully in person. You have a lot of people that are in the wrong firm and really peed off. So I think the free market is going to have a variety of management practices. And you're right, the firms that are more hybrid or remote are going to naturally be those with better management practices. Now, I'm a huge fan of Jamie Dimon, and JP Morgan's done very well. So it's not to say fully in-person firms are necessarily badly managed, but to flip it around, if you are going to have people come in 1 day a week or then cloud first, you're going to have to be well managed to make that thing work. And I think that's what we're seeing now. I think, to be honest, firms like JP Morgan that want to do it anyway are coming in, and then there's another set that can't make it remote or hybrid. They're not up to scratch, and they're also forcing people in.
So go ahead.
No, I just was going to ask this is an interesting follow-up, I think. Isn't the big problem that performance management is generally done badly? It's usually been it was a pre-digital process. I mean, there would be business process that included a lot of workflows, and they would be done and they would be approved, and they'd sit on a desk and nobody'd look at them. There was no way to manage the information because business process didn't really allow that. The performance measurement was poor. It didn't focus on outputs. When we went to the pandemic, people weren't there, so you had nothing. You really had nothing other than, is somebody working? Can you call them up? Do they seem like they're awake? But when we get to the digital era, I mean, once we have AI is essentially going to replace a lot of that middle management because the outputs are going to be either yes or no, and they're going to be done or not done, or the quality will be here or here. It'll be a totally different experience, whether a person sits at home, in the office, or on a beach. It's the same outputs that they're going to expect to achieve, same level of productivity, same things that will be measured across the entire workforce, with different business process, obviously. So isn't it the fact that we don't really have a digital business process in place yet anywhere almost? And that we're not really getting this continuous improvement that will come out of that with AI kind of asking questions about why are you doing this and this, and we should change.
My take on it is, honestly, is impacted. I worked at McKinsey for a while. I mean, that was, many moons ago. That was over 20 years ago. I've had many jobs, but I have to say McKinsey was, it's in the press for the wrong reasons right now. So I'm not going to defend the entire firm, but their performance management system is very good. And as a consultant, you're doing a whole variety of jobs. This was, the early 2000s. So it's really certainly pre-AI. Computers were much less sophisticated then. Their performance system, I thought, was extremely good. What they would do is every 6 months, they have a whole grid of things you're supposed to be doing. And they'd have, your managers, the partners, your clients, co-workers assess you on it. They tally it up. They'd have a cohort, and they'd kind of look at you as a cohort. I would have more frequent meetings with my manager. She used to sit down once a month and say, Nick, here are the key things. Here's what you've done right. Here's what you've done wrong. So every 6 months when I got the performance review, I knew what was coming. The worst thing is a performance review, and you think you've done great until you've done badly. You're like, that's a bust system. The problem with that was it's very time consuming. So the partners said, we're spending a day a week on this stuff, and it's expensive. So my sense is pre-pandemic, a lot of firms just thought it ain't worth the money. I mean, that partner's day a week could be billed out, and they just have bad management, frankly, and they thought it wasn't worth it. Suddenly now, if people are not in the office, that is a lot more important, a lot more valuable thing to do. So my sense, having looked at a lot of companies, is performance evaluations are just costly to execute because they take management time, but you can do them pretty well. It just is not straightforward, and they don't, it's not like they drop from the sky.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
As a former recruiter, Nick, my ears perk up when I talk to young people, especially a woman I met on Saturday at an outdoor selling event. And she's about 28 years old, and she's working in DC. And she said what she loved about the place that when she was hired was she had immediate access to elders, as she called them, people that could help her do her job well and help her fulfill her own management and leadership goals. And then she said, of course, with the pandemic, people aren't in the co-location the way they used to be. And she's frustrated about that. And it's actually impacting her thoughts about staying with the company. She wanted to stay with this brand a long time, but she's thinking about going elsewhere because she's missing opportunities to learn at the feet of somebody who's more senior and more experienced. So my question is sort of prompted by what you said about Zillow. Do you think those monthly meetups that Zillow does, could they in fact be the gathering point where some of that leadership bonding happens, and so that people who want to work remotely can work remotely, people who want to be in the office can work in the office, and yet they're still gathering at some central point face to face in real life? What are your thoughts on that?
So totally, her story I'll come back to. I've heard this repeatedly. So one general theme you hear is mentoring, learning, development, training is typically best done in person. It's not terrible, useless remote, but it's easier in person. And when I talk to Zillow or Instacart, any of these big remote first firms, they tend to focus more on hiring 5-10 year plus experienced folks. Apart from AI is hard because there's really no one in that bucket, but like they don't really take summer interns, because for an intern, being an intern remote, it doesn't really work very well. So they generally focus on people that need less mentoring, and they're already more experienced when they get there. I'll give you a good example of your friend's comment I hear over and over again was from law firms. So I've spoken to a lot of law firms, an accountancy firm, a kind of consulting firm, and they had very similar stories. So they would say, look, the new associates, they are typically 25 to 30. Right. They want to come in 4 days a week. They say, look, I want to get mentored and developed. Friday I work from home, but the other 4 days I want to come in. I really want to push my career up. Problem is the partners who are doing the mentoring don't themselves want to come in that much, because the partners will say, hey, you know what? I get paid on fee income, and I make the most fee income if I'm at home working with my current clients in my nice house. I can concentrate, and then I go to the client site. I have no particular interest to come in. They maybe want to come in 1 day a week. So there's a total disconnect. How do you fix it? Well, option one is kind of, ignore it. And then you have upset associates that aren't learning very well, and it does, they leave, your example. Option two is you tell the partners, you got to be in, and you start badge swiping. But, these are partners of firms that are earning several million, and they're angry about it. Option three, I think, comes back to the discussion I was having with Mark and Francis about is proper performance evaluations. So there is an old theorem in economics called the multitasking principle. And the idea is very straightforward. So it comes from Paul Milgram and Bengt Holmström, that both won Nobels, worked on. This goes back to the 70s, which is, say, if you've got two activities, but you only reward somebody for one, guess which one they do. So to take me, imagine I have to teach and do research, but you only pay me for teaching. Guess what? I don't do any research because I do very little, because I'm not bothered about it. And so it's kind of like that with senior partners. If all you do is you pay them for fee income, but you also want them to mentor, guess what? They don't bother with the mentoring. So the solution to this is basically for law firms to tell its senior partners, hey, guess what? You're getting 75% of your pay, promotion, bonuses based on fee income, and 25% for mentoring new associates. And we're going to ask them. We're going to survey them en masse and see which partners are coming in And there are 2 organizations I spoke to that were in the process of going through that. When I checked back in with them, they were like, guess what? Suddenly the senior partners are coming in 3 days a week. It's a miracle. Well, it's like incentives 101. So yes, Dan, if you have people that want to get mentored and the seniors aren't there, it doesn't work and they get upset. And probably the best way to do that is evaluate and reward them for that mentoring. Just kind of get straight to the point.
Sounds. Fran?
Nick, there are 2 groups of people who seem to really benefit from the pandemic experience. And RTO is now taking this away. And that is women, particularly childbearing age women. And the second group, maybe not as big, but still very important, is the handicapped people who find it to be enormously beneficial to not have to make the commute, more than maybe once a week. What's happening with both of those groups today? What can be done to try to get some balance into the command to just come back to the office? And is there a process that you could see or envision that could begin to become an advocacy group or an advocacy slogan for both of those groups?
That's a fantastic point. So just to be clear, actually, I've been collecting data on both of these. The folks with a disability in America is actually an enormously big group, much bigger than people think. So you're exactly right. To put numbers on it, there are 30 million Americans that report they have a disability, which is a huge number. And who are these? These are mostly people in their mid-50s upwards that have ambulatory, they can't walk properly, back issues, vision issues, etc. So we just actually put out a paper earlier this year showing that pre-pandemic, there are only 6 million of them working. So that's a very low work rate. Some of them are retired, but a lot of us, they just, these are 57-year-olds that just are not working because they're not really able to. Post-pandemic, it's gone from 6 to 8. And our paper shows that most of that is due to work from home. I won't go into the boring details, but it's using a lot of microdata. And why is it? There's 2 things. To many people, one or the other is obvious. One is it's just easier. You don't have to commute. So even if you're hybrid, if you only have to commute twice a week, it's a lot easier than 5 times a week. And secondly, is you can control your work environment. And I've interviewed a lot of folks about, you have a colostomy bag, using the bathroom at work is really difficult. You have back issues, an office chair, etc. So that group has seen huge increases in employment. You are correct. The other group that's benefited has been particularly women in their 30s and 40s. Also men, actually. You see a slight increase in men with kids, but particularly women with kids, graduate women with kids. Now, there has been some evidence recently, the RTOs has kind of reversed that. So, what do we do about it? One argument, I'm totally in favor of work from home. There is some hope that, the market partly takes care of it. I've talked to a bunch of firms like JetBlue. If you've ever flown on JetBlue's call centers, I visited them, are manned by very educated, very able people who are typically college educated women with young kids who would never go into the office 5 days a week, but prepared to work from home, manage these, work on these. So for anyone listening, for companies, there's an amazing labor market out there, very highly educated, skilled people that if they're allowed to work from home can take this stuff up. But you're correct, a full-on RTO where you have some 55-year-old male CEO pushing people back disadvantages these groups the most.
Got it. So no meaningful effort one way or the other with either group that you think would make sense?
In terms of policy, I would not do what the federal government is doing currently and ban work from home in all government offices. It doesn't make any sense to me. I think it's driven. It is driven by a desire to have people quit. It's not driven by any other logic. Oddly enough, by the way, we showed that fertility is increased by allowing work from home, including hybrid. Right. So, the current administration is very in favor of, increasing U.S. birth rates. It's very odd to be beating up on work from home. But yeah, beyond that, encouraging firms to do it, making sure broadband connectivity is good, making sure there's some odd things that don't seem obvious, but fixing state taxes. So just to be clarified, California taxes you on where you live and New York on where you work. So if you live in California and work for a New York firm, you get taxed twice, which doesn't seem like a good deal.
That's Connecticut. That's Connecticut too, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just, there are, but those 2 states have for high earners, you're looking at 10% twice over. So, I'm totally in favor of it. It's clearly benefited those groups. So the folks with the disabilities, an enormous impact. We have a study actually out in Turkey where he looked at a tech firm, and they went from fully in person to fully remote, and you saw the share of college educated women went up from about 20% to 60% of their workforce, because they're getting these amazing people out in cuts, smaller cities and towns where they'd never commute to Istanbul, but if they're allowed to work from home, they'll do that 5 days a week, and they were very happy. They've stuck with it. They've not gone back post-pandemic.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
I just want to follow up on one of the points you made, Nick, about fertility. A stressed individual has a lot of cortisol in their system. And if they are working a 70, 80-hour week, their chances of getting pregnant are much less than if they are less stressed and not commuting. I'm not giving you scientific evidence, it's somewhat anecdotal, but as someone who went through years of infertility, partly because I was working a 996 type of experience in the workplace, I think there would be some birth rate benefits, again, to encouraging more work from anywhere.
Totally. I had a friend that had similar long struggles, and so was saying, look, you can't get pregnant by email, and I'm never at home, and this is turning out to be a real issue. I'll give you numbers on it. Actually, we're presenting it late, in there's paper on showing that there's a very strong correlation between working from home and fertility. Yeah. One view is if you're at home, it's easier to conceive and have kids. Right. The other view is when you have kids, you start to adopt work from home jobs, and it's hard to tell which is cause and effect, but the magnitudes are pretty large. They look like allowing hybrid, as we have post-pandemics, could increase US fertility rates by about 100,000 births a year. So to give you a baseline, in America, there's about 3.5 million children born a year. So adding 100,000, quite a lot. So yeah, if you're a government and you want to have, the population have more kids, you should be encouraging work from home. It's easier to look after kids. It's easier to conceive. It's easier to manage your lifestyle. Totally agree.
Maybe Japan should look into that, right? Where they're having a birth drop.
You are spot. Look, I actually spoken to the South Korean government a bit. Their birth rate is 0.7 per couple. Which you can imagine, if you do the arithmetic, they're halving. They're forecast to halve population numbers within 40 years, and halve again, is kind of explosively downwards. And there it's really extreme because the commutes are very long, and the apartment sizes are tiny. It has everything going against having multiple kids. And so suddenly, if you allowed someone to work from home 3 days a week, you can see they can move further out, get more space, have more time with their kids. So yeah, totally agree.
Dan, just a quick follow-up to Nick on the income discrepancy between remote or partial hybrid or partial distributed and all in office. Is that split? I saw that recently it was about 20%, that was the discount for not working in the office. Do you follow that logic?
Yeah, so I'll give you 3 different ways to look at it. It's very complicated. So one way is if you look at, something called the American Community Survey, serves about a million Americans a year across the whole board, and it asks your job, your education, where you work, a bunch of stuff, including how much money you earn. If that data goes back to 2000, if you look back in 2000, in fact, some of it into the 90s, what you saw is controlling for your job, how much you're educated, your industry, etc. People working from home were about earning 20% less. So back in 1990s and 2000, it's like you can do it, but you're going to have a massive pay cut. Interestingly, that gap is closing and closing and closing. By the time you get to the pandemic, it starts to reverse. And now it's kind of a bit of a perk. So if I was to tell you somebody I know is working from home 2 days a week, you're going to start to guess, well, they're probably a manager or professional. They're probably moderately senior, etc. So in that sense, that looks good. So, working from home is actually an indicator of higher pay. The other number is 8%. That I often quote, which is how much people say they value the ability to work from home 2-3 days a week. So if Mark said to me, hey, Nick, either you're going to come in 5 days a week and be paid 100,000, or only have to come into the office 3 and work from home 2, how much do you want to be paid? And the average number people give you is $92,000 as an 8% less. Okay. And that's kind of the breaking even. And if you do the maths, if you figure out how much time you're going to save on less commuting and less, grooming, etc., it turns out to be 7-8% of the working week. And I often tell managers, look, unless you think your person's 8% more productive coming to the office, it ain't worth it, because there's money left on the table. you can say pay somebody 4% less, and they'll be as productive, and you're both you and they are happier.
Okay, helpful. Thank you.
Mark?
Nick, you've said and continue to publish data that suggests that hybrid is stabilizing, and we've been through 4 Septembers where there have been RTO mandates, and then the numbers just hold solid. So are we in an economic stability point now, or is this possibly inversely the eye of the storm if indeed there's going to be a substantial shift in the fabric of the commercial office industry as a result? Or said another way, are we in the early innings of peak office? And if so, what might that do to the markets, and what should leaders be preparing for next?
So certainly it was your phrase, peak office. We have indeed passed peak office. The amount of square footage of office space in the US, I believe, you guys know Fran, know better than me, you and Fran, but I think it's on the downward trend. There's more stuff being scrapped and less stuff being opened up. The rationale is clear. There's a lot of companies that are now hybrid, don't need as much space. We are stable now. If you like work from home, you have to love capitalism, because why is work from home, particularly hybrid, stuck? It is because it is profitable. And, I have this paper in Nature last year showing hybrid is very profitable. Why? We did this massive randomized controlled trial with Trip.com, the NASDAQ quoted company worth 50 billion. And they show if you let people work from home 2 days a week, they're no less productive. They're no more productive, but they're no less, because it's quiet at home. They save on commute. There's things they balance off, but their quit rates fall by a third, and quits are really expensive for companies. So Trip's own numbers estimate it's saving 30 million a year, and it's putting up its profits. And so, not surprisingly, most of the Flex Index data, 69% of the Fortune 500 are hybrid for managers and professionals. Why? Because it makes money. So on that view, thankfully in America we're capitalists, Europe and much of the world, and it's just profitable for companies to do it. Coming back to the answer I gave to Fran earlier, if people value hybrid at 8% more pay, but they're no more productive, it doesn't make sense. You basically have to pay them so much more money to get them in the office, but they ain't any more productive. So it's just a bad deal. And so that's where we've settled now, and I don't think we're shifting anywhere soon.
Do you think that there's any wrong expectation then built into the economic markets with regards to the value of the commercial office built landscape, which I sense at least has been, holding its breath in anticipation of RTO impact? But is there some illusion in the valuations right now? And if so, is there a shock yet to come with regards to the reset that might have to happen around that asset class? It's pretty big.
No, so again, I think the office market is fine. So as in all markets in economics, when the price drops, demand increases and supply decreases. So how does that work out in the office market? Offices take a long time to plan and build, but right now, I see it in Palo Alto. Pieces of land do come up occasionally. I was just having lunch opposite a vacant building, and it's an office, and I know from the reading of the local papers, it's going to be converted into apartments. So there is a bit of, there's less new building, and there's some conversion. I am aware both of those are not enormous numbers, but add them up year by year by year, and eventually the supply of office space slowly shrinks. In San Francisco, interestingly, I was talking to some folks in the mayor's office. Since the office rates have fallen by about 50%, you've priced in a lot of people, so demand goes up. These AI startups, they wouldn't have paid the prices that it was cost in 2019, but if you say, look, we'll give you a lease for 40% the rate, they're like, yeah, sure, we'll go into San Francisco. So I think the office market is actually fine. And in the long run, like any other markets, so I'm not pessimistic on the office market. I just think supply is contracting and demand has responded, and it looks fun. They had good years, they had bad years. We had some good years up to 2020. We had a few bad years. In the long run, it's like any other asset. It's like investing in equities. It goes ups and downs, but on average, office probably pays out roughly the same as equity.
Yeah.
So, Nick, what kinds of surprises are you girding for in 2026? What we're not talking about, is there anything that's bubbling up in the numbers that you're looking at that we should be paying attention to?
It's a good question as well. What happens? People ask me what happens if there's a big recession. I think if there's a moderate recession, a kind of one where unemployment goes up to 7-8%, it's about 4% right now. Yeah. That's a nasty one, but it's not an 08 or a 2020. I don't see that much happening. Why is that? Well, partly just, if work from home is profitable, hybrid is profitable, it's profitable to do it in recessions as well as normal times. And B, if you just look at tech has been in a kind of one industry downturn for the last couple of years, and they're not really calling people back to the office. So actually, I think that's the dog that, won't bark. Look, if there's something truly awful, it's hard to know. There's something called the Anna Karenina theory of business cycles, which is, if you know that book, it's happy families are all the same. Unhappy families are all different in the way they're unhappy. Well, it's like that with recession. So expansions all look kind of similar. Recessions look totally different. There's, the financial crisis, COVID pandemic, Gulf War I, OPEC, they're all different. But so if something, I don't know, a meteorite strike or a nuclear explosion in the middle of Europe, or I don't know, Ebola, it's hard to predict. But if that happens and it's a cataclysmic recession, then work from home could drop back. But we probably got bigger things to worry about. Yeah. I think the other thing for me that's interesting is technology is improving. I was up in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago. There's a company called Noro that makes these like 12 by 12 foot screens. They're currently really expensive. They've got cameras throughout it. So, for everyone listening, I'm looking at you guys on my laptop, and I have a really small screen pushed up to the top because my camera is sat at the top of the laptop. And if I look into the middle of the screen, it looks like I'm looking at all of your shoes. So I'm looking at, 4 heads, including my own, that are kind of an inch size. So the future, I remember thinking this in 2020, surely someone's going to do something better than Zoom on laptops. And it hasn't really changed. So that's, maybe by 2030, we'll have huge screens that you roll down onto the wall and they cost a couple of thousand, have cameras, or maybe virtual reality or fantastic holograms. I think tech making work from home is where I see there being some advances, because there's a freaking big market for it. There's 50 million, 100 million people working from home every day around the world. So there's a lot of money in it. AI has been great. We talked about that earlier, but the tech has hardly progressed in 5 years. It reminds me a bit like driverless cars. Like to my left, my next door neighbor used to be Sebastian Thrun. If you know who he is, he was one of the early inventors of the driverless car. So I moved into my house in 2010 and he had one in his driveway. So that's now 15 years ago. And I remember thinking at the time, these will be everywhere in 3 or 4 years. And clearly, that tech is great, but it hasn't progressed very fast. It feels like kind of audio visual is the same thing.
Next year, there'll be a lot of them, won't there?
Well, I know that kind of Waymo. I see.
Yeah, Waymo's making some big moves. But
when they be maybe by 2030, driverless cars will be mass market. My 16-year-old just learned to drive. I kind of thought when we moved in here, she was a baby, and I thought she'll never learn to drive because it'll be pointless. I have a 10-year-old, my youngest. Will she learn to drive? Probably, because even in 5 years. But that's a different topic. But I think, if you were to say, look, 5 years out, I think the technology for this kind of thing, as in video calls, will be a lot better. I'm surprised how slow the progress has been, because we don't look that different from 2020. But there are things I've seen in VCs and tech firms, etc. Mark, you probably know this, better than me, that are in the works.
Yeah.
Fran?
I know we only have a limited amount of time left, Nick, but on the question of data and data quality, this came up, of course, in Washington when we lost the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, because he had bad data. It wasn't favorable to the president. But seriously, there was a lot of discussion around at that time of the nature of that process in terms of how that data is collected. And it's basically a 50-year-old process with manual stuff being mailed out and people fill it in and send it back. And you even in you have using stuff that is the Census Household Services Survey. That's the monthly surveys that go out. I looked at one of those surveys once, and I said, no one in their right mind would spend the time to fill this out and mail it back. That was my opinion. But when are we going to be able to make progress in this area to try to get some objective data associated with some of the things that we're all very interested in terms of occupancy and activity and other things that are important in the workplace?
It's a great question. So I know the BLS situation. I know Erica McFarter, who's who fired. It's a glass half full. So their data is by far the best there is. It is very hard. Their job is very hard. Just to give you a sense, of 200 million Americans that are working. When you're trying to look at changes in that, which are typically 1 to 200,000 a month, that is like 0.1% change. So it is hard to measure it. On work from home, we survey but it's getting boring. I have to say, I'm not sure how much longer we're going to serve this line. It's like flat because, no one's, it's not changing. I kind of like the data I like best is connected to the fact I'm holding this thing up, my cell phone. Yeah. Americans are never more than 2 feet from their phones. It's kind of it's tethered to them in their pockets.
Can you do sorry, I'm going to do like a FanDuel app for if you go on and you make a comment or you give us some data, you're in the running for a prize or something like that. There's got to be some way to get more active.
Oh, I was going to say this Castle, but I won't go into that. But Castle is swipe data, which looks good, but it's really only offices and it has an issue. It's only Castle's current live offices they're using. So to be clear on Castle, if they scrap an office because no one's going in, it disappears off the index. So it has a natural tendency to overinflate return to the office. I like the Placer AI data probably the best. It tracks cell phones. They have a great index that tracks cell phones into roughly 700 offices around the country. That looks a lot like a work from home index. In fact, so much so that, give it a year or two, I'm not sure we'll still be collecting it. But that
I've got another 6 quarters of data I can share with you. So,
okay, well, Mark, you have your own. Yeah, that's right. You have your own in-house data. It's feels like crowdsourcing. I mean, Fran, if you can do the competition, we'll see what we're out there. We got in. The thing that I did notice is no one was working from home that much pre-pandemic, so there was not much measurement of it. That was the ultimate issue, and then suddenly it explodes. People start measuring it, as did we. But getting longer time series is hard. But it's now become boring again for good reason. I don't think we're going back, and so
okay.
I hope not. There's got Mervyn King, the old governor of the Bank of England, said he was happy, when life was boring because it meant he was doing a good job. I feel kind of like that with work from home, and there's no exciting things happening. Kind of it is winning.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Brilliant. Wrap us up, Mark.
Nick, I'm delighted to hear, and I'm sure our listeners are too, that you're working on a new book. Thinking about that, and you even mentioned, I think, talking to CHROs and people folks, it seems like a lot of the RTO noise gets pinned on the CEOs, and maybe that's deserved. It probably is in most cases. But what about HR? In your view, is HR leadership playing offense or defense inside these companies when it comes to hybrid work? And I mean, shouldn't they be the ones that are leading the evolution and leading the advocacy for it, not enforcing 2019 policies?
No, they totally are. I talk most actually now to HR folks. I talk to a lot of HR folks, and they almost always, in my experience, or maybe only the ones that talk to me. But I go to events and big shindigs with a lot of HR people, so it's not that they're not so selected. They are generally in favor of hybrid. I mean, there's a range of views, and I get that some are in favor of coming to the office, but on average, compared to their CEOs, they are more in favor of hybrid. They're more of the view, look, you want folks be in, 3 days a week. You just don't need to be in 5. Why are the CEOs tougher? CEOs, partly it's type. Look, these are typically, the average CEO is a 56-year-old, white man, and their kids are at the house. They have an executive car or jet. They don't kind of suffer the costs of going in and out of the office. And I think the other thing is, from their perspective, they've been phenomenally successful. So take Jamie Dimon. He's been incredibly successful. He's a total rock star. I mean, he's kind of the most famous banker in the world. He looks back at his own career and says, I did that all going in 5 days a week, probably knowing him 6, 7, 8 days a week. If you could probably discover that 8th day. So he kind of has in his mind, that's the way other people should do it. So CEOs, I feel, are a little bit biased. Some of them I know are getting pushed by their boards. In the data, the Mark Maher data is fascinating. You see the RTO announcements follow bad stock performance and bad accounting performance. So the other narrative is, something goes south. You used to blame the unions or weather or, product recall or whatever it was. Now you just blame work from home and you cancel it. And that gives you, it's like one life. So, HR is on point. My view has been trying to feed HR with data and research that they can take to CEOs. Some CEOs love that stuff, and they're kind of our friends. Others are just gut instinct decision makers, and they don't care about the paper in nature or the data. They have their view, and they're the CEO and I'm not, so I guess they get paid the big bucks for taking these decisions.
Well, gentlemen, we've run out of time. Nick, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Before we get to our final question, I want to ask you where our viewers and listeners can find you on social media and perhaps even connect with you. And when's your book coming out?
Oh gosh, social media, LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn, so pretty much only on LinkedIn. And my book, it's coming out in probably March. Now you might think that's March 2026, but sadly it's March 2027. And I should probably feel grateful it's not March 2037. But your book just takes so long. But yeah, 18 months from now, and that's apparently speedy. It just, I now see why it took the Egyptians, 50 years to build the pyramids. If you write a book, you can understand these things.
Unbelievable. Well, I wish you luck with that, and when it does come out, we will definitely bring you back on to celebrate that. I want to do something special for you. I want to revisit our question to you from almost exactly 2 years ago when I asked you the question, "What's your work fit?" So let's visit that, and then I'll ask you to tell me if you want to amend it at all. Here we go. I have one final question for you, and it is, what's your work fit, Nick Bloom? What attribute, condition, experience, place, or state of mind makes the work you do a wonderful part of your day, doing other wonderful things, and this is the best part, and not the all-consuming time suck of a day? What's your work fit?
I have a very unusual thing. I'm weirdly hybrid. If I turn around, I'm on a camera out the window. That is Stanford campus.
Beautiful.
So my commute to work is by bike, and it's 5, 6, 7 minutes. So I do hybrid within the day. So what happens, being on the West Coast, in the mornings are frantic because, the East Coast in Europe's awake. And so I basically have back-to-back, Zoom or Teams calls until about lunch. Then normally go and see students, meet colleagues until about 3. And then often I'll take my youngest, or, we have a kind of a childcare rota, one of my younger 2 kids, to soccer. I just, work next to the field. It just turns out to be easier. So I'm sat in my car. So if anyone gets an email from me between 4 and 5:30 West California time, I'm probably sat in a car next to a training pitch. But I am hybrid day by day. But I get, if you have a half an hour commute, that makes no sense. But if you live next to the work, it actually, on the West Coast, I never get out of the house before about 11:30 because it's continuous Zoom calls.
How'd that hold up?
Wow, it's terrifying. I'm probably in the same shirt. I have a back. This is the one shirt I own, the same picture. In fact, I think if you look on the floor, there's the same old Apple core lying down there. So, no, look, I'm 52. Not much has changed. So I'm still hybrid on a daily basis. But I love working with students. I love research. Great. This kind of. This is our jobs. It's fantastic. We get to talk about super interesting things like this.
Thank you so much, Nick. And gentlemen, this has been great. Nick, we hope to get you back a lot sooner than 2 years from now. This has been great. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. Maybe like 8 years when my book finally gets published.